Earlier in 2020, I was pleasantly surprised by The Babysitter, a 2017 comedic horror movie. A few months later, I was happy to hear that they released a sequel, and I couldn't wait to see if it would hold up and match the entertainment value of its predecessor. I'm sure you're wondering too, which is why I'm reviewing for you The Babysitter Killer Queen. For this comparison to work, I will also need to discuss the original. Could have made a separate review, but I was eager to start this one, so I decided to combine them, which worked pretty well actually. So let's start with a summary of the original. This review contains spoilers, so if you do not wish to be informed about the plot of this movie, you can skip ahead to this part of the video for the review summary. The original Babysitter introduces us to Cole, a scrawny little scaredy cat, a classic bullying target. He's afraid of pretty much everything, including but not limited to needles and spiders. This little sucker is juxtaposed to this smoke show, who is the titular babysitter. He's pretty much everything Cole is not. She's cool, charismatic, impossibly hot, confident, and popular. Despite being polar opposites, they hit it off very well, since they appear to be the same kind of nerd. It's adorable. The other characters introduced to the opening sequence are Melanie, the neighbor girl and a friend of Cole's, and her father, who's just all kinds of pathetic. Cole's mom, who does the dirty work around the house, and Cole's dad, who seems to be the funny one. The latter two are not really relevant to this story. The important thing is that they exist and that they are not there. Then one night, B offers Cole some alcohol. He chickens out and doesn't drink it and goes to bed. B is having some friends over and Cole is going to spy on them because he wants to know if she is banging any of these people or something. And right when you forgot you were not watching some sappy rom-com, the movie reminds you that it's actually a horror story. Youch. I'm not proud of it, but I was actually surprised. Should have been obvious, but the movie disguises it as a romantic love story, which worked actually. This bloody incident turns the atmosphere of the movie around. Apparently the knife guy was some sort of sacrifice and Cole's blood was needed, which makes you wonder if that was the whole reason B was so into Cole. He freaks out and calls the cops and then prepares himself by getting armed and plans his escape, but he chickens out and then pretends to be asleep. They don't kill him but instead just take a little blood. B notices how the window is open but leaves anyway. Cole once again attempts his escape but faints before he can get out of the window or before he can notice B entered his room again. So a bunch of unknown weirdos are in Cole's house, murdered a dude and siphoned his life essence. They have captured him and tied him to a chair. This is where shit gets full on satirical and the movie takes on a bunch of horror cliches to make fun of them. The super hot guy who is shirtless for absolutely no reason.
Why is he shirtless?
That's your first question?
The lack of realistic perspective.
Oh my god. Does he not even see the mirror behind him? We can see you cutting the rope.
The unhelpful police that gets slaughtered while backup is somehow avoided.
10-4, all clear. We're code 7.
The black guy dying first.
Black Lives Matter too! You feel me?
And the body jump scare. Then he escapes the remaining antagonists and instead of running away he hides in an obvious way and just ends up trapping himself. He has to face them whilst also overcoming his fears, like his fear of spiders and earlier on his fear of needles. And also he learns to stand up to bullies, so there's some sort of positive message woven into the story or something. We've already seen him take out John, and after he blows up Sonia and hangs Max from his treehouse, he has to face B. But, wait, weren't there 5 of them? What happened to the cheerleader? Oh right, she was shot in the boob by one of the officers a few scenes back. Forgot to mention that. Well, there you go. Remember Melanie, the neighbor chick who was clearly a plot device? Well, Cole flees to her house and she lets him in even though it's the middle of the night and there are kids with a bedtime and stuff.
He is bad.
Oh shit man, it was going to be gooey and romantic after all.
Let's make out next time.
Okay, bye.
So after that incident, Cole has to go outside and walk that boner off, and he returns to his house. Oh look, the boob girl is back, and he still gets to deal with her. After throwing the entire content of their kitchen at her, B blows her head off, and only the 2 of them remain.
That was so graphic.
Then Cole finds the Devil's Verses, which is where the sacrificial ritual is described. Mix the blood of the sacrifice with the blood of the innocent, say an incantation, and let the blood touch the pages to get anything you want. It seems like a good deal to me. Cole is outraged and burns the book. A furious B tries to put it out while Cole steals his neighbor's car and uses it to destroy his house. Once inside, they say goodbye after some dialogue implying she was not that bad after all.
I see. Goodbye.
So that's part 1 of The Babysitter in a nutshell. I didn't go too deep into the individual scenes since the main goal is to review part 2, and this was mostly just a little background. Out of all the horror movies I've watched since I started the idea to make this channel, this was by far my favorite, and that's a lot more than the few I've reviewed so far. What I like most about the movie is how the creators did not take themselves too serious. They made fun of the cliches and stereotypes, which made it hilarious. The cast consists of a group of stereotypical slasher victims, but instead they're the bad guys here. They've shown to have thought about common issues and flaws in horror movies, but purposely let them in for comedic effect. The gore is overly gratuitous, which is discussed by the characters in a fourth wall breaking fashion. The movie also contains a ton of references to some old film classics. Even with the above in mind, the movie is not without flaws, of course. There are a few tiny continuity errors, but nothing that really bothered me. The leads weren't bad, but aside from that, there was no award-winning acting going on here. Then again, the movie didn't really need top-tier acting. The same goes for the horror aspects. It was not particularly scary, although I must say even in this regard it outperformed some of the bad horrors I've seen without even trying. Overall, I feel like the movie had the proper balance between gruesome, scary moments and comic relief, which made this incredibly entertaining, which is why I'm rating this 8 out of 10. The movie was fine as a standalone story, but there are a few loose ends. The biggest one, of course, is Bee. Who or what was she really? She was portrayed as some sort of devil here, but was she really full-on evil? The ending in particular has cast a little doubt. Also, what was the significance of the book? They've given an explanation in the movie, but what happens now that the book has been burned? In the story, they said Cole was not the first kid, so this was likely not her first ritual. Since it could give her anything she wants, it's not unlikely that this wasn't even her true form. She could be ancient for all we know. At the end, it was shown that she had vanished, but did she die? The very last scene implies she didn't. If burning the book would break potential contracts, then it also implies that she's not older or less attractive in reality, as she did not change upon burning the book. Most of the other questions only became relevant once the sequel was launched, and I'll get to them while I discuss Killer Queen. The movie starts off with the final 8 seconds of the original movie and then transitions to the present. So, from this to this is supposed to have been 2 years? In the first one he's said to be 12, which would imply that he's 14 here. But I'm not buying it. Based on release dates, one could argue that 2 years isn't that far off, but part 1 was actually recorded in 2015, and part 2 at the end of 2019, so there's actually some 4 to 5 year gap rather than 2 years. Aside from that, Judah Lewis, the actor that plays Cole, was 18 when this was recorded, and 13 or 14 when the first one was. Passing this one off as 12? Fine. But this one is 14?
Nope.
Seems like a minor detail, but the entire story feels weird if he's meant to be 14, which you'll notice throughout the movie. So we're not even half a minute in, and we've already seen the first mistake. To say first, I meant second. Remember when at the end of part 1, Cole ran a car through the front porch and destroyed his house? How is it still exactly the same? I mean, sure, they've had time to repair, but when I said exactly the same, I meant literally exactly the same. This is obviously stock footage from the first movie. The scene itself has Cole grabbing a glass of milk, which appears to have been fake milk, and it turns out he was just imagining it.
Hey, buddy, you okay?
And then it appears to have been a fake scene, and it turns out he was just imagining that. He then goes to school with messier hair than when he just woke up, and we get a little summary of what happened and how it messed him up. Apparently he told everyone what happened, and nobody believes him, not even his parents. They think he made it all up and that he's some sort of nutcase. But that right there does not make any sense and pokes a lot of holes in the original story. First of all, if something like this happened to me, I wouldn't tell everyone, especially if I'm already a target for bullies. I would tell my parents, maybe share it in confidence with a close friend, but hell, I'd probably seek counseling first. Despite the fact that the story is inherently hard to believe, it's weird that everyone thinks he's crazy. There should be plenty of evidence that could back up at least parts of his story. It must be obvious that something must have happened. I mean, Bee disappeared, like poof. After the incident, she was gone. His parents knew her, and several of the bullies are shown to have met Bee, so it is implied that her existence is known among plenty of people that Cole interacts with. Are they all just accepting the fact that she went up in smoke? There were many bodies left in and around the house. It may be hard to identify Sonia, but someone hanging from your treehouse and the guy with what looks like some sort of trophy shoved up his jugular should be pretty hard to miss. Even in the assumption that everyone from the cult just vanished, there's still Samuel, the sacrifice dude, that was explicitly shown to be stashed in the garage. There should be some sort of police investigation here. I mean, whatever way you put it, someone drove a car through his house. Unlike his classmates, the authorities cannot really laugh this off, and the house and its surroundings would be checked. They'd find a ton of blood and at least one body. Again, even if all the blood from the cult members vanished with them, and even if someone had the time to hide Samuel and clean up any track of him, 2 policemen were murdered there. Sure, they were hidden along with the car, but their shotgun would be found in their house. Also, even if they don't know they died, they still disappeared there under suspicious circumstances. If anything, if they don't believe Cole and any of B's fingerprints disappeared, he'd probably be locked up for life for multiple homicide charges, or be sent to an actual insane asylum. Anyway, the scene shows he did actually seek counseling, and it's confirmed that he's in his junior year, further supporting that unless he's some sort of whiz kid, there's no way in hell he's actually 14. The counselor can be recognized as the doctor that gave Cole his flu shot in the first movie, and he has a very interesting advice.
We just gotta get you laid.
That's your advice?
In other news, Melanie is really hot now, and she has become Muscle Boy's eye candy. There is some dialogue implying even she does not really believe him, but there's also subtle hints that she's into him. And there's talk about a trip to the lake, but Cole doesn't seem too interested. Then we're introduced to Phoebe, the cringy edgelord who probably has a few screws loose. She gets a big introduction, comes out of fucking nowhere, is kinda nerdy, and sunglasses and weird hair aside, is very attractive. Are we dealing with a reincarnation of B here? Then there's a half fun, half informative series of scenes at his house where we learn the following things. Cole's getting a fuck ton of pills prescribed, medication to treat depression, anxiety, psychosis, delusion, etc. I doubt it's a good idea to combine all of them, as some of them have similar effects, but I don't mind the overkill, and at least the ones I can read are actually medicines that apply to the conditions his parents think he's suffering. Cole and Melanie are discussing a literature paper, Cole's parents want to send him to some sort of psychiatric institution, and when Cole can find the previously mentioned literature paper, he finds out his parents' plan of sending him away. There, all up to speed. Once back at school, Cole shows Melanie the pamphlet and she convinces him to evade his parents and join her on her trip to the lake. And eventually he reluctantly agrees. But before he does so, there's a scene of him in class where his laces are tied together to cause him to fall over. Remember this bit, it will be important. Speaking of important, Phoebe finds a stuffed bunny and a key in her locker. Seems a bit random, but it will come back later. They get into her dad's car, which is another over-the-top douchey sports car, and apparently these guys also join on their trip. When nameless side characters suddenly get names in sequels, it's a safe bet that they will get more screen time. Case in point, Cole's parents have become Archie and Phyllis, and they get a little storyline of their own, which gets them a little more involved than,
Are you the one that put the knife in the dishwasher?
that. I don't really mind them, but unfortunately their subplot also involves this guy. And I can't stand him. He had the perfect amount of screen time in the last movie, just enough to show he exists and that he's an asshole. I just don't get what made them think, oh, you know, this movie needs more of Melanie's annoying dad. Nor do I understand why he's friends with him, even though it was shown he was actively being a dick to his son. But fine, this asshole still exists, and upon finding out his car is gone, he's willing to go and find her.
No! Seriously?
Her being the car, not his daughter, who's also missing. Then they spend a whole scene in a store which bears little relevance other than that they acquire a silly string. Nobody really cares about that, the only thing people remember from this scene is her. She actually has her very own FAQ section of people wanting to know her name. For science. Once again gonna remind you that he's supposed to be 14. They arrive at the lake where there's some sort of party weekend going on. After initially getting cold feet, Cole throws his prescription drugs into the lake and joins a party boat. There's a short scene that shows the parents are looking for their kids and that neither Juan nor the officer take it seriously. Okay, back to the lake, where it's evening now. The party is getting started and they're playing 7 Minutes in Heaven, which is like an upgraded Spin the Bottle, basically just some game horny young adults play to get some action. Right when things start to get gooey and romantic, Melanie reveals information she could not have known unless she was in the cult. And yes, we found out that she is.
Because I signed my name in it, Cole.
And she destroys Boom Boom. I was prepared this time, so it wasn't that much of a surprise now. The whole party turns into a reunion when Max, John, Allison, and Sonia make their appearance in this sequel. They unveil some cult info in this scene. It is confirmed that they are in fact dead, but due to their deal with the devil, they are stuck in limbo. Apparently the ritual is something that can only be attempted once every 2 years. I suppose that's what the 2-year timestamp was for? But what's the harm in making it a 5-year timestamp and rewriting the ritual cooldown accordingly? Is it really that hard to give them appropriate ages and not canonically turn this into bordering on softcore child pornography?
We're back!
And then Phoebe enters.
You!
Is she in fact B incarnate? No, she was just looking for gas, and weirded out by what she sees, she leaves. Cole flees and escapes just in time to land on the back of Phoebe's jet and they take off, but not before Max shoots a harpoon that hits their gas tank. Despite the implication that she was out of gas, they manage to reach this island with a leaking gas tank. Cole informs Phoebe and surprisingly enough, she believes him. And thus it has turned into a survival game. They need to evade the cult members until sunrise as the ritual needs to be completed before that. Will they manage to stay alive, or will they be caught and have their blood drained? Stay tuned to find out.